associated as seeking almost £35 million. Mr Justice Nicklin has said that would be unprecedented in as far as he's concerned and thinks it's very high. Do you remember the Wagatha Christie case a few years ago, Cathy?
Certainly do.
Rebecca Vardy and Colleen Rooney. That was a much smaller case, and that took almost 3 years to reach a decision on costs.
Now, Prince Harry has been given a week to pay his share of £9.5 million in legal costs relating to his failed privacy case. The Prince lost a case against the Daily Mail's publisher, Associated Newspapers Limited, over allegations of unlawful information gathering. Let's speak to David Brown, The Times' chief news correspondent.
Yeah, afternoon, Cathy. Couldn't have gone much worse for Prince Harry this afternoon. He was seeking a limit on the costs he'd have to pay for the publisher of the Daily Mail, and the judges dismissed that, saying that the conduct of his privacy claim was so extraordinary, the unfounded allegations of criminality, maintaining allegations of wrongdoing, there was no evidence, so he's ordered Harry and the others to pay the full costs that were incurred by Associated Newspapers.
And David, for people listening, I must explain that you're actually in the bowels of the High Court right now, which is why it sounds slightly cavernous, I think.
Sorry.
No, don't apologise at all. You're at the scene, in the thick of it, as it were. But this initial payment of £9.5 million, that is just the initial payment, isn't it? There's up to £25 million more to come.
Yeah, Associated is seeking almost £35 million. Mr Justice Nicklin has said that would be unprecedented in as far as he's concerned and thinks it's very high. Do you remember the Wagatha Christie case a few years ago, Cathy?
Certainly do.
Rebecca Vardy and Colleen Rooney. That was a much smaller case, and that took almost 3 years to reach a decision on costs. And in that case, Colleen Rooney, who won, her costs were only £1.8 million. So unless there's a speedy settlement between the two sides in this case, this could drag on for years. Of course, increasing the costs. There's lots of very talented and expensive lawyers involved in these arguments.
Yeah, and he and the 6 others got 7 days to pay. It's more than the agreed standard costs. But, there's the business of insurance, isn't there? So how much will this actually potentially set Harry back personally, or nothing at all?
Well, they've got insurance. We heard the hearing last month. They have insurance of £16 million. We're working on the assumption that the insurers will pay that first £9 million, leaving, a very significant shortfall if Associated are awarded their entire £35 million costs. Apart from a very small proportion for each of the 7 claimants, most of the costs are what's called common costs, so say 33 million in total possibly, and they're all jointly liable for that. If we're being realistic, people like Baroness Lawrence of Clarendon, Sadie Frost, Liz Hurley, although wealthier than the average people, don't have that sort of money, and Harry's got some significant moving bills and school fees coming up. Realistically, one would expect that perhaps Sir Elton John might have to pick up the bill for much of this on behalf of the other claimants.
Well, is there any sense that he's willing to do so there, or is there also any kind of intelligence on the kind of potential, acrimony following this settlement between the claimants?
Well, what we do know is, of course, Baroness Lawrence of Clarendon, the mother of Stephen Lawrence, the victim of that awful racist murder. I covered that trial. She tried to reach a settlement with the Daily Mail prior to the start of the trial, so there was clearly tension there. But afterwards, she issued this extraordinary statement along with Prince Harry, in which she described a High Court judge's very considered judgment as a whitewash.
A complete and obvious whitewash.
When the same judge has to decide how much legal costs you should pay.
Is there any suggestion then that description of the judgment, which was, raised eyebrows, not least within, the royal family more widely, has it exacerbated this issue of costs for the claimants?
It's a 44-page judgment, this cost judgment. It's very detailed. Mr Justice Nicklin, a very experienced judge, goes through the points point by point. What he does say within there is one of the reasons he's granted this, what we call indemnity costs, the much higher level, is because of the campaigning nature of this action, that this was an action to try to kickstart, reopen the Leveson inquiry, to bring down Associated newspapers. He highlights the false claims of criminality on behalf of many journalists at Associated newspapers. I would have thought having two of the claimants coming out with this damning statement, obvious whitewash, it must influence him. There was no apology there or any sense of, well, thank you for your judgment, it was considered and we accept we've lost. So yeah, I think it probably did play into the judge. Harry and the other claimants were looking for a cap on the total bill, and the judge has said he seriously considered that and then ruled that out. So these are the implications of knee-jerk reactions.
And David, we're going to speak to Daisy McAndrew in just a second, broadcaster and royal commentator. But just your thoughts finally on whether this case has in any way, I know we're speculating, but has it in any way, do you think, played into the decision by Harry and Meghan to return to the UK?
The costs are going to be an issue. We don't know how they're panning out. We know that Harry has insisted that Doreen Lawrence won't pay that bill. Let's be honest, Cathy, the real cost that Harry faces are security. I don't think those bills are going to be much cheaper in the UK. I covered the very many High Court hearings where Harry was trying to get taxpayer-funded security and failed in those cases as well. Has he come back over to continue his campaign against the press, the establishment, the royal family? Perhaps he sees this loss as a battle that needs to continue fighting.
Wow. OK, David, thank you so much for your expertise. I know you've covered so many cases. Great to hear from you. Thank you. That was David Brown, The Times' chief news correspondent. Let's turn now to Daisy McAndrew, broadcaster and royal commentator. Your reaction first, Daisy, to this court ruling?
I mean, what an absolute dog's dinner, Cathy. I think yesterday lots of people, myself included probably, were thinking Harry and Meghan are back and perhaps this will start to, ease the wrinkles in the relationship between Harry and the rest of his family, between Harry and the press, and between Harry and the public. Well, that's sort of blown up in all our faces today, hasn't it? And I do wonder whether this is going to make life very difficult in that fixing thawing, Operation Thaw, as we're told it is, between the King and Harry, because Harry has been very critical of the government as far as his own security needs is concerned. And now he's being very, very critical of, as you said, the establishment and the judiciary. And I'm not sure that's what his father, the head of state, would like his youngest son to be doing.
Well, just continuing where David left off in terms of how this need for money, not just for this to settle this court case, as we discussed, there's some insurance, but not for the whole amount. But also the costs that he faces for security. How might that play into this decision, this suggestion that Meghan has an acting job that could be potentially lucrative? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, look, we don't need to get out the world's tiniest violin as far as Harry and Meghan's bank balance. Lots been said in the past 24 hours about, they've failed miserably in America and they're coming back with their tail between their legs and they haven't got any money. I mean, that's pretty categorically untrue. They do have plenty of money. Maybe they haven't got as much as they were hoping to get, and maybe some of those big gigs in Hollywood weren't as lucrative or weren't as ongoing as they were hoping for. But Harry is in a very, very wealthy individual. He inherited an awful lot of money from his mother, and they have made a lot of money in the last 6 years, both with his book, which was an absolute bestseller, and he got millions and millions for that, and various other projects. So they're not short of a penny or two, but you're quite right to say that their security bill is enormous. It's reputed to be somewhere between $2.5 and $4 million a year. Now, if by coming back to the UK, he can negotiate some sort of halfway house deal, some sort of state-funded security, even only on the days in which he's out and about sort of doing public duties. Now, obviously, they're not going to be working royal duties, but it's not necessarily, when it comes to the security, whether or not he's a working royal, it's whether or not he's at risk. And he is a VIP, he is a senior royal. So that's sort of to be decided. Now, we know that the Home Secretary and the Home Office are undertaking a review at Harry's request of the situation. We don't know what's going to happen, and it has taken ages. The review, I think, was meant to be happening in March, and it's completely seems to have come to a standstill. So that must be very frustrating for Harry as well. And Cathy, it's amusing, and I'm sure you know this, but one of the main reasons why RAVEC and the security system seems to be under some paralysis at the moment is because we have been so careless with the number of prime ministers that we've had in the last few years that they are overrun with former prime ministers that they're having to give 24-hour round-the-clock security to.
It's a significant issue for them, that, isn't it? But I suppose there has been some speculation that by Harry returning, it might expedite that decision from the Security Committee. But, the Prime Minister said yesterday there were no plans to provide the Sussexes with any taxpayer-funded armed police protection. But there is a likelihood, isn't there, that situation will change if he is living here with his family.
There is a likelihood, and whether or not that is taxpayer funded, or whether, like with Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, whether his father digs into his pockets and contributes to the security. And of course, whether, if Charles is feeling generous, he's only going to be feeling generous if relations are good and if Harry is not causing trouble for his or the family. Well,
let's talk about that then, because I wonder what sense you're getting about how Harry and Meghan will be received by the royal family more broadly, and because there's been little details about what their arrangements are going to be when they come back, but there has been a sort of media circus, hasn't there? And that must dismay the high-ups in the royals.
It will, because of course it's a distraction. And now the royals are on their summer break at the moment, so it's not as if they're doing back-to-back events that they would like to get favourable publicity for. But when business goes back to usual, when the term starts, both the royal term and the academic term, then they will be hoping that the Harry and Meghan circus or interest doesn't overshadow the other work that the royals are trying to do. And it's been very notable in the past few months. There's a newish in the last few weeks Ipsos Mori poll about whether the public believe that the king is doing a good job. So this isn't necessarily his personal popularity, it's whether he's doing a good job, which in some ways is more interesting. And overwhelmingly, people think he is, and increasingly they think he is. He's managed to push those figures up really significantly in the last few months by 20 or 30%. So something he's doing is working. And I think the Trump trip was a big part of that. Unlike most royal trips, it had real cut through. People who aren't interested in the royals or who aren't particularly interested in politics knew that the king had had a successful trip, knew that he had faced up to Donald Trump, and they thought that that was exactly what the king should be doing, that was a job well done. So that sort of impetus that the king seems to have at the moment is of course fragile, and he will be, the advisors around the king will want to do everything they can to make sure that he keeps increasing his popularity and that side of things rather than decreasing it in the face of Harry and Meghan.
And just very briefly, Daisy, we've got this suggestion that Meghan, confirmation according to Tina Brown, a royal commentator, that Meghan will take an acting role. Will she be in demand for her acting ability or her celebrity? What are you picking up?
I mean, look, I'm not an acting expert. I'm not in that way. But we do know that once an individual actor becomes more famous than the roles, it's very difficult to cast them. So the only role she's had since being a royal has been a cameo as herself. And it's difficult to imagine, if you're sitting down popcorn in hand and there up pops Meghan, who's so famous, are you really going to be able to suspend your disbelief and enjoy the film or the TV show? Or are you just going to be thinking, oh, look, there's Meghan? So I would struggle with that. Now, of course, if it's a small movie or project that wants to get some publicity and perhaps wants to get some financial backing, then bringing her in could help a lot. I just can't see her, and I'm not being rude about her acting ability, but I can't see her being the leading lady in a big blockbuster. because of the fact that she's so famous.
Daisy McAndrew, thank you very much for joining us on that, broadcaster and royal commentator there. What would you like to see Meghan star in? Let us know.